Hi everyone, welcome to Intro to Guided Math. Today, everything that we talk about is going to be based on the books called Guided Math Workshop and Guided Math, A Framework for Mathematics Instruction by Lainey Salmons. So my name is Marina Clark, and I am a second grade math specialist here at NEISD. If you have any questions after this session, you can find me at mclark5@neisd.net. So throughout our session today, I'm going to be asking you to stop and reflect on things that we discuss. Please take the time that you need to think about what we've said, to process it, to understand it, and then to respond in those designated areas. So meet Mr. Soto. He is a teacher here at NEISD. And in the past, he has used guided math in his third grade classroom, and currently he's using it in his second grade classroom. Let's hear what he has to say about guided math. What made you try guided math, Mr. Soto?
Well, knowing that I needed to do something extra to reach the students who were on different levels, guided math allows me to give them differentiated target instruction. It was, an odd year last year, to say the least, when it came to distance learning, where they ended and what they covered. So as students start trickling in from being virtual to in person, being hybrid, and then in person, guided math was the one way that I thought I could reach them at their level.
What successes did you experience when doing guided math?
Well, working in smaller groups allowed me to really see what each student's strengths and challenges were. Once I saw that I was able to provide that target instruction for my struggling students, and also provide extensions and enrichment for those who already had the grasp on the concept, it makes a lot of difference in your small groups, and you don't have to go at the pace of those outliners, whether it's a student that already has mastered a concept, or the student is very, very struggling at a lower level.
Okay. And what are some ahas that you've had so far about guided math?
Well, once the structure was set in and became a routine for everyone, it was super easy to maintain the schedule, and having amazing conversations with the students at the small group. It just became more comfortable. Even students set their own alarms in their devices so they would not miss, their small group time. And when a student had to be virtual, or I became hybrid, that routine never left them, even for those few days or weeks that they were virtual. They would show up for their math groups, and it was just easy to interact with them. I think once it's more relaxed, it's not dictated or listen or pay attention kind of thing, they're able to learn, and from others next to them immediately as well. So it was a big aha.
And so what advice would you give to teachers about guided math?
Start small. Start small with a couple of centers and just get it started. Add more rotations once your students start getting the hang of it and the routine. And just keep your groups flexible. A lot of the times you do have pre-assessment and post-assessments that can drive your instruction, but once a student is showing mastery of the TEAC or concept, then you can just be flexible with your groups and allow yourself to be like, okay, this didn't work, I'm gonna try something else different. It gives you a lot of grace when it comes to, I don't need to follow these groups or anything. Just keep it flexible. That's what I would say.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your ahas and your ideas, Mr. Soto. Keep up the good work.
We'll try. Thank you.
Initially, Mr. Soto was hesitant to try guided math, but after he tried it and saw all of the gains that his students were making, it made him more willing to continue doing it. So one of the gains that he's mentioned in our conversations when we've spoken about guided math is that he saw that there was more of an opportunity for his students to converse in that small group. When he pulled them over to his table to meet with them, even if he had to work with one or two students because they might be struggling with the concept, he could hear the other students at the table continuing to discuss the math, using math vocabulary, and just continuing the instruction and teaching each other. So he felt that that was just a great benefit to meeting kids in small groups, because there was more opportunities for the kids to talk with each other about the math concepts. And so, as we know, research says that that is one of the most effective strategies that we can use in instruction to move our kids forward. Lainey Salmons, the author of the book that we showed at the beginning of the slides, says that with ever increasing diversity of students in classrooms today, it has become more evident that students' mathematical success hinges on teachers' ability to differentiate instruction so that all learners are both supported and challenged as they work to master the required curricular standards. So what this is telling me is that guided math is going to be a tool that we can use to help differentiate instruction for our kids. Our kids come to our classroom with multiple needs and multiple struggles. So it is very helpful to do this system because it helps our kids to be met where their needs are. So what is guided math? In the past, when we hear of small group instruction, we think of intervention, remediation, reteach, right? But guided math is essentially where you take your math block and the teacher is meeting with all students in small groups several times a week, not just once, not just twice, it's several times. And while the teacher is meeting with those students, the teacher is able to differentiate students' learning. They're able to instruct in the core content, that tier 1 instruction, whatever they're currently learning. And while they are working in small group with the teacher, the other students are working on their workstation tasks. And those workstation tasks are previously learned concepts. You're spiraling in everything that they've learned in the past into these workstations so that they can continue to refine it and to practice it. And those tasks, of course, are going to be intentional and differentiated. So we're not going to put fluff in there or things to keep the kids busy. We're going to put tasks that are meaningful and that are really going to help the kids to solidify their understanding of whatever you are instructing. And so that's essentially what guided math is. It's meeting with small groups every day or multiple times a week to instruct on tier 1 instruction, the current content. So why should we do it? Why should we do guided math? Well, Mr. Soto touched a lot on the reasons that research says that we should do it. And so one of those reasons, of course, is that it allows for differentiation. We are able to hit that target of moving our kids forward because students are receiving instruction in the way that they learn best. Their instruction is tailored towards their needs, and all students are going to be able to move forward and not regress or stay stagnant. So another benefit of doing guided math is that, as we stated before, all students are going to move forward. In times past, when we taught whole group, we might have been able to teach to the middle or to the kids at the top, but there was always going to be somebody that fell through the cracks. Well, when we use guided math, because we're meeting in small groups and every student group is getting the differentiation that they need, all of the students are going to move forward. And then, of course, as Mr. Soto talked about, that culture in the classroom, meeting with kids in small group creates a positive classroom culture. Kids are able to discuss their ideas more when they're in the small group with the teacher, and when they're in the workstations, they're able to work together to help each other, to really get an opportunity to use that math vocabulary. So the culture is going to become more positive because they're going to feel more successful. And so the other reason is that it increases student engagement. So as you know, as Mr. Soto stated, the kids are eager to do guided math. They're excited about it. They, you know, they like moving from station to station. They essentially like the change. Remember, our kids need to get up and move and increase their movement quite a bit during instruction for them to be able to really grasp what they're learning. So guided math helps in that. It helps to increase the engagement because you're changing the activity every so often, and so that helps kids to stay focused. So what is guided math? What does it look like? And so many of you have heard of guided reading. Guided reading is, where you do the word work, the shared reading, the guided reading. They do centers and workstations, and throughout that entire system, you're constantly assessing your kids. Guided math is essentially the same thing. So in guided reading, you have word work. Well, in guided math, you would have that math warm up, number talks or problem solving. In guided reading, you have that shared reading time. Well, in guided math, you have that whole group instruction. In guided reading, you have guided reading. And in guided math, you have small group instruction, where you're continuing to discuss that current content. And then in guided reading, you're going to have centers and workstations. In guided math, you're going to have the exact same things. So if you are familiar with and can do guided reading, then you will definitely be able to do guided math. So let's take a look at the components of guided math. The first component is, of course, number talks and or problem solving. And so usually you want to take 5 to 10 minutes to do this every day. In the lower grades, I would encourage you to use number talks a little bit more. And in the upper grades, if you feel problem solving is really going to need to be done as a whole group in the beginning of class more often, then I would, do 50-50, because number talks are extremely helpful in helping to develop that fluency. So this is where they're, for number talks, they're going to be doing mental math or finding those number relationships. And of course, the problem solving is that guided problem solving time. And so I do want you to notice that the max is about 10 minutes. We don't want to take a long time here because it's a lot of whole group, and because we want to be able to have opportunities for kids to meet in small group. And so the next portion of or component of guided math is that mini lesson, that whole group time. And so in this whole group time, you want to use this for maybe activating prior knowledge, or connecting the math concept to literature, or setting up expectations. Maybe you're introducing some new workstations that week. If you're introducing concepts, so for example, if this is the first day that you're going to be talking about geometry or addition or place value, then whole group would be beneficial, because everybody's on the same level with the concept. It's new. Mini lessons could be used to do modeling and think aloud, or to review previously mastered skills, or for formal testing. But I'd like for you to notice that for the most part, whole group time should be limited to the least amount of time possible, 5-10 minutes, maybe even 15, because the goal is to ultimately have the least amount of whole group time so that you can give that time to small group. So really, I would encourage you to try to use whole group as little or as least as possible, unless it's a necessity. So the next component of guided math is, of course, your small group and workstation time. As we mentioned before, while you are pulling students into a small group, working with them on core content, other students are at a workstation, and they could either, be working independently, or with partners, or with small groups, or a combination of the three. But they're going to be working on previously learned concepts. We can't put new content in workstations because the kids will not be able to do it on their own. So during workstations, it's spiral review, previously learned items. Now, while you're in the small group with them, you're going to be able to differentiate, you're going to base it on their needs. You're going to be able to, review or introduce new concepts if you're going directly into small group. you're going to be able to provide that intensive and targeted instruction. And, you know, you can even do reteach if you need to. So that small group time is going to provide the time for practicing, for students to become fluent, and of course, again, to be able to have differentiated instruction. If you'll notice, the time allotted is 70 to 80 to 90 minutes. So this is where you want to spend the bulk of your math block. And finally, we have our conferencing and assessment. And so this is where you are working with kids, maybe one-on-one or two-on-one, or just kind of pulling kids aside to see where they're at, or maybe what struggles they're having, so that you can provide them with that immediate feedback and support. So again, to review, the components of guided math are number talks and problem solving, a whole group time, which is a mini lesson, and a small group time while simultaneously having workstations. And then of course that conference and assessment time. And here in NEISD, the district has provided more specific information for us. They are encouraging us to provide 90 minutes of math time for core content. And so problem solving and number talks, here it does say 15 minutes. I would encourage you to make it 5 or 10 so that you could provide the majority of the time for core content, which is small group, whole group, and workstations. So let's review. We're going to play a little game called Fact or Fib. And so in Fact or Fib, you're going to have an opportunity to read a statement, and then you're going to decide if it is a fact or a fib. And once you decide it, you're going to indicate it on the screen, and then we will be able to move forward. So let's look at the first statement. Is this fact or fib? Guided math is a rigid framework. There is no whole group instruction in guided math. The learning target can only be introduced through whole group instruction, meaning you cannot provide core instruction, which is the learning target, during any other time except whole group. Learning math in the guided math framework is a constructive and social process. Assessment is optional in the guided math framework. Small group time is only for intervention, not for core instruction. So how do we start it? Some of the things that we need to think about as we try to start guided math is, how much time do I have for my math block? What resources do I have available? What's my classroom management style? What space do I have in my classroom to be able to make this work? Some things you want to consider are, you know, before you start guided math with your students, the environment is going to need to be prepared. And so, you know, I'm not necessarily talking about aesthetically, it needs to look pretty. What I mean is, you know, it needs to be easy to maneuver, easy to move around, easy to access resources and tools, easy to work together. All of the things that are involved in guided math, it needs to be as easy as possible. You want to make moving through those workstations and using those cool tools as smooth, you know, move as smoothly as possible. So here's some ideas. In the past, some people have had very organized shelves with their manipulatives and any materials the kids might need so that they can very easily go and access them. Here's what our small group table would look like. You want to make sure that it's completely cleaned off, that you've got plenty of room for those kids to work at with you. And you want to consider putting this table as far away from the noisy game groups as possible, because it's going to be difficult. You're going to be competing for attention. And then of course you want to designate workspaces for your students. So you want to consider how the kids are going to move through your classroom as they are doing their workstations. So here's an idea on how to get started. I am a list kind of girl. I need, step by step. Okay, first I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do that, to help me really understand what I'm doing and how to do it. So I created this list and it helped me. I've noticed that every time I work with a teacher to help get them started on guided math, this is essentially the process that I follow. So I put it in writing and you can use it if you need it. So the first thing that I encourage you to choose is your rotation. Are you going to want to be a part of it, or are you going to want to be separate from it? Choose a rotation model. How many workstations are you going to want the kids to go through, and what are those workstations going to have? The next step would be making a plan. How are you going to have everything organized? What are you going to have in the workstations? How are things, where are the tools going to be? Are they going to be in the workstation? Are they going to be able to get up and get them? All of those things. Make a schedule. So take a look at your math block and decide, okay, well, these 5 minutes or 10 minutes, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that for the next few minutes. And, here's the 45 or 50 minutes or 70 minutes that I have for small group. And I'm going to be able to, meet this much time with each group. So you're really going to write out a schedule. And then decide on some routines and procedures. If, whatever you have decided and planned out, how many workstations you're going to have, what's going to be in there, you're going to have to create some routines and procedures so that kids will know exactly what you expect them to do. And then of course, you're going to want to practice, monitor, and adjust. So kids are going to need that time to hear the expectation, to process it, to practice it, to get feedback, and to adjust. So let's break this down step by step. Step one, rotation. Are you in or out? So, do you want to be a part of that rotation system, or would you like to pull kids out? There's pros and cons to both. So some pros to being part of the rotation is that it's a little bit easier. You don't have to manage as much, and your kids would get equal time in every single rotation, or every single station, including yours. So those are some of the things to consider. Now, some of the things to consider if you're not part of that rotation is that it is a little more, to manage, because you're essentially having them rotate through workstations independently, and you're pulling kids out of those workstations. So that being said, a benefit of pulling kids out of a rotation and you not being part of it is that you can really have whatever time you need for each group. So if you're talking about the struggling students, when you pull them out, you might, need to give them 20 to 25 minutes. But maybe those bubble kids maybe they only need 15 to 20 minutes. And maybe those high kids that are GT, or they're just ready to move forward because they get it, then maybe they just need, 10 to 15 minutes. So there's a lot more flexibility when you are not part of the rotation. And when you are part of the rotation, then those groups have to be homogeneous. So they have to be the same. And so when they're at a workstation, they might struggle together because they might, not understand the instructions, or maybe have a little bit of trouble. So that would, you'd have to make sure that that workstation was very differentiated for them. Now, if you're pulling kids out of the rotations and you're not part of it, then you can have kids of, mixed kids within those small groups away from you. And when they're with you, so you're going to be pulling out kids that are on the same level. So with you, they're going to be on the same level, but in their small groups where they're working on workstations, they're going to be mixed levels. That's one of the benefits of pulling them out and you not being part of the rotation. So, step one, do you want to be in or do you want to be out? Think about it. So after you decide if you want to be part of the rotation or you want to pull them out instead, then you're going to want to choose a rotation model. You know, how many workstations do you want to have? So here's some things that you might want to consider as you decide this. How much time do you have for math? So if you don't have a lot of time, I would encourage you not to have a lot of stations because it's going to be hard to move through them. You know, how many workstations do you want to have or do you feel the kids need? What grade level do you have? Because that's going to determine the complexity of the system as well. And then how many workstations do you want your kids to do every day? So if you want them to do every single one of your workstations every day, then you need to make sure that they have time to work meaningfully in that workstation. So let's take a look at this rotation model. In this one, the teacher is part of the rotation. So it's a 3-station model. Okay, so you're one of the stations. Here's the teacher. And here's workstation 1 and workstation 2. So here would be like a schedule that they would follow. So the red team, for example, would come to you first. And then after they work with you, they would go to station 1. And then after station 1, when the timer goes off, they would go to station 2. And that would be it. And the same would be for the blue team. Maybe they're going to start in, you know, station 1, and then they're going to move to station 2, and then they're going to come to you. So, you know, every student group is going to rotate through all 3 stations every day. So if you'll notice, there's really only 2 separate workstations that you would have to prepare because your core instruction is going to be happening here. Well, here's essentially, you know, a 3-station model again, but you're not part of the rotation. So in this one, you would have to prepare 3 workstations and you would be separate. So again, the kids would rotate, you know, for example, the red team would go to station 1, then station 2, then station 3, and every other team would do the same thing, except they'd start in their respective station. But as they are moving from station to station, you can pull out a kid from station 1 and one from workstation 3 and one from workstation 2, because you're not limited to being part of the rotation. So you can be pulling kids out of every single workstation as needed. Here's a 4-station rotation model with you in the rotation. So it's you and then 3 other workstations. And so again, you know, if the red team starts with you, then they would go to station 1, station 2, station 3. And that would be true for every team. They would start in their respective spot, and then they would just go through every workstation. And it would be equal amounts of time for every single station, including you. Here's a 4-station rotation model where you're not part of it. So in this one, you would have to prepare 4 workstations and you would not be a part of the rotation. And so they would rotate independently through those 4 stations, and throughout their rotating through these 4 stations, you are pulling kids out of the various workstations to work with them. And here's a 5-station model where you would be a part of it. So there's you and then 4 other workstations, and here would be the schedule, same as before. And then of course you could have a 5-station rotation model where you are not part of the rotation and you're pulling kids out while they are going through those workstations. So these are just some ideas. And then of course, some teachers like to do where they only go to one workstation a day. You know, maybe you struggle with the space that you have, or maybe you have too many students. And so maybe on Monday, the kids are gonna, you know, maybe the blue group is gonna be in workstation 1 on Monday. And, you know, the yellow group will start in, you know, workstation 3 on Monday. So, you know, and the teacher, since you're separate from that rotation, you're gonna be pulling kids out every 10, 15, 20 minutes as needed. And then since the blue team started on Monday in workstation 1, then on Tuesday, they would go to workstation 2 and they'd spend the rest of the math block there. Now, this rotation model has its benefits. The only thing is that if you only have them go to one workstation a day, then you need to make sure that they have all of the things that they will need to do in that workstation for that day. So you would have to put more than one activity because they would be spending the entire math block there. So you know, I know that it sounds like it might be complicated, but I want you to take a look at some of the ways that teachers have organized their workstation ideas. So take a look here. This teacher, she used a like an anchor chart paper, and she drew 4 quadrants, and she just labeled it table 1, 2, 3, and 4, and she put their names on a post-it and she stuck them there, and then the kids that were going to meet with her were on this post-it, and then she probably just after every rotation moved them to a different spot. And take a look at this teacher. This teacher used a model where the kids would put the paper clip on the workstation that they wanted to go to, and the 6 or the 4 or the 4 here or the 6 here means that there could only be 6 kids here, 4 kids there, so on and so forth. So really, one of the things that you want to make sure that you do is that you make whatever system you use, whether it be 3 stations, 4 stations, and whether you're part of the rotation or you're not, you want to make it visible to the kids. They have to have it posted somewhere where they know, oh, okay, once I go to this workstation, then I'm going to go here. And then once I go there, I'm going to go here. They need to visibly see it, and it needs to be clear to them. So here's some ideas on how you could have it posted. Here, I've seen this before where there's like a cookie sheet that's, metal, and then the teachers put a little gingerbread man or something, and they put a magnet on it, and they just stuck the kids in their workstation. So here are some workstations. This teacher had 6. So, these kids went to workstation 1, which was math literature, and these went to fluency, and these went to problem solving, and then they would just move from station to station. So that's an idea. This is very visual. The kids, can clearly see their name and see where they're at the workstation. So if you'll notice, this is like for a kinder class. So the numbers here represent the workstation that the kids are going to be in, the group of kids are going to be in. And then the colored cards right here, these are the cards for the different activities. So that's very visual. It's color coded for kids. Kids know colors. And then here, this is where it's kind of like the chart that I was showing you earlier with the rotation examples, where it's, here's the rotation 1, 2, 3, 4. Here are the groups 1, 2, 3, and group 1 is first going to go to meet the teacher, then they're going to move to math tubs, then to independent practice, then to problem solving, and so on and so forth. So these are some great examples of how you can really make it obvious to kids where they're going to be going and when. And then of course you have the self-selected system. So this is basically where kids are choosing where they want to go. Like this one where they put their little clip wherever they wanted to go to, or this one where there was, a contract or some sort of, planning sheet or recording sheet that the kids would document what workstation they went to. So for example, they could only go to this workstation 5 times, and then that was it. Or, they could choose to go to each one once or twice, and they'd color it in every time they went to that workstation. So the teacher knows, oh, little Johnny spent all their time at this workstation, I need to talk to them, or vice, or maybe little Johnny went to every single workstation and I want him to spend one more day over here, or something like that. So these are very explicit. Now, I would encourage you not to start with this because it's the system that provides the most freedom. And if you're new to guided math and you really want to get the basics down, then I would encourage you to start with something more structured. And if you like this self-selected system, move into it once you get the hang of it. So let's stop for a minute and think about which model you connect with. So, we talked about being in the rotation or not being in it. We talked about having 3 workstations or 4 workstations or 5, or do you want them to go to 1 workstation a day or all of them? There's so many options. And so think about which model you might want to try for your classroom and why it might be beneficial. And so I'm going to give you a couple moments to think about it, and then I'd like for you to record your answer on the screen. So remember, whatever you choose, it's okay, because nothing is written in stone. And if you decided, you know what, I want to start with being part of the rotation and I want to do 3 rotations, and then it doesn't work, that's okay. You know, you're not married to it. Try something different. Maybe you're part of the rotations and then you realize, you know what, I got this. I'm going to start pulling them out because then I can spend more time with, you know, the groups that need it. Great. Change it, because this is very fluid and it's very easy to change it up. So the third step would be to make a plan. How are you going to organize everything? And so here's some ideas on organizing it. So of course, you want to decide how you're going to organize and keep your workstation. So you remember that system that we were talking about earlier where it was color coded? Well, here are the workstations. So this teacher decided to, you know, post what they were doing here. And then here are the color coded workstations and their little bins with the activities in them. So whatever you decide, just make sure it's organized and it's easy to figure out. And you want to keep it simple. Make sure your procedures, as we said before, make sure they're easy and simple. The least amount of steps that there is, the better for you and your kids. And of course, you want to make those tasks worth it. You want to plan your tasks with those specific goals in mind. Make sure that they are covering the current grade level TEKS and the needs of your kids. So, and of course, you want to reuse your tasks. Don't reinvent the wheel. If you played a game on place value at the beginning of the school year and you want to spiral that in because you want to make sure that they remember place value, then put it in, even if you're in the, in the addition and subtraction unit, or even if you're in the geometry or the measurement unit. It doesn't matter, because that's a game that they've done before, so they'll know how to play. Or it's a task that they've done before, so they'll know how to do it. And it is spiral reviewing the content that they need to review. So don't make this harder on yourself than it has to be. Reuse, reuse, reuse. Here's some ideas on ways that people have organized it in the past. There's tons of ways. These are just some ways that we've seen so far, we've found on the internet. So, here, this is very similar to that kinder teacher where they have designated numbers and inside of those little boxes are the tasks. Here, it's, the MATH, the math with someone, at my own, at work on my own, teacher's choice, and hands-on manipulatives, those tasks were actually in a bag instead of a bin. So this is for a group, this is for another group, or this is for another group, or maybe, you could do it the way they did it here, where it's, this is geometry and this is addition, subtraction, and this is, 2-digit addition and subtraction centers. So another way is to do this little acronym math and put it in bins like that. And then another way is to have bigger bins with more workstations, and then it's very obvious what you're going to be doing because it's designated up here. So really it's dependent on whatever you can manage and whatever you're going to want to do. So let's talk about introducing those workstation tasks. So remember, when you introduce a workstation task, you want to keep it simple. So you definitely want to make the procedure simple, the materials, everything. Make it easy to remember. And so don't feel that you need to change a workstation task just because it's a new day or a new week. You don't have to do that. You're going to change those workstations as needed, because some of those tasks you can redo over and over because they're open that way. And if it's a skill that the kids need to practice, leave it in. You want to vary the content of the workstation. So let's say that you decide to have a games workstation, right? So the way that they do the procedure for that workstation is always going to be the same. They'll always have to, play quietly at, voice level 1, and you're going to be recording your answers of the game on a, on a recording sheet. Whatever procedure you have set, it's going to be the same. What's going to change is the game that is in the game workstation. So maybe this week it's going to be a place value game, and then maybe in 1 or 2 weeks it's going to be addition and subtraction game. So the content is going to change, but the way that they do the workstation is not going to change. Accountability is another important thing. You want to make sure that kids are accountable when they are working in their workstations. So you know, maybe having, like I said earlier, a recording sheet even for games, or, you know, just different things that you can do that you are able to handle, so that one, it tells them, well, this is important because I'm, you know, I'm going to have to turn this in, or I'm going to have to show my teacher what I thought or what I, you know, was thinking. And it also, you know, kind of helps them to process what's going on in the workstation a little bit more. It makes them more in the moment and focused. And then, of course, whatever workstations you choose, keep a record of it, maybe a binder where you have copies of all the games that you did for maybe one of the units or for all of the units, because you don't want to reinvent the wheel next year when you start guided math again. Keep the stuff that works in a binder so that you can just bring it out again the next year and just, you know, oh, okay, these games or these activities or these tasks work well for place value. I'm going to use them again and put them in my workstations again. Work smarter, not harder. So here are some examples of workstations you might be able to have. So these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 workstations, and one of them would be on my own. So in this workstation, you'd set up a procedure, tell the kids how you want them to work in it, and then you would vary the tasks. So maybe this week it's going to be spiral reviewing place value. Next week it might be spiral reviewing geometry or measurement. You know, but it's going to be on their own. This would be problem solving. This could be like hands-on tasks that make them think, or it could be, you know, word problems. It just varies. Fluency would be like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Those are the 4 operations that kids need to practice those skills regularly. So maybe this week it's going to be addition, but in a couple of weeks it might be, you know, multiplication. The procedure would be the same every time, but the task would be different. And expressing math ideas, maybe you want to, you know, have kids write about the math that they're learning, or maybe they're gonna, you know, be playing something like Odd Man Out, where they're matching, you know, where they're putting a group of 4 vocabulary words together and then saying, well, this one doesn't go because. And so that's expressing their understanding of the math concept. So that would be in this workstation. And games, of course, would be any type of game that is reviewing the skills that they need to know. So these are just some ideas. You know, some people like to have just a couple, or maybe they like to combine fluency and games. It's really up to you. So what I want you to stop and think about for a minute is, what categories of workstations would you like to use? After seeing some examples, you know, what do you think you might want to use? So for example, let's say you decided, well, I want to have 3 workstations. So then you think about, well, what do I want those 3 workstations to have in them? What do I want them to be? And so maybe you might choose expressing math ideas. I want kids to write about, you know, about what we've been learning. I want them to talk about it with other people. I want them to draw it, or, you know, maybe use that vocabulary. So just something where they're expressing what they are learning in multiple ways. Maybe you're like, I definitely want fluency because they need to practice those operations. Then you would have a fluency station. And maybe you'd say, well, I really want them to practice their, you know, the skills in and a game with games as well. So you'd want to have like a games workstation. So these are the categories of workstations, and the content would change, you know, every so often, but the category and the procedure to do the category is always going to be the same. So I'm going to stop for a minute. I want you to think about it. What categories of workstations do you think you would like to use? So let's go on to the next step, which is make a schedule. What would this look like on a daily basis? So one of the things you need to think about is, you know, what is my math block going to look like? You know, what does it look like on a typical day anyway? And you'd want to create a schedule for that math block that incorporates whatever components of guided math that you're going to put in there. And so, you know, here's some examples. You know, when you're introducing a concept, remember we talked about how that's one of the times that you would want to do whole group. So take a look at this schedule that I created with a teacher. their math block is from 120 to 240. And so from 120 to 130, they decided everybody's going to be doing number talks, right? And that would change between, you know, alternate between number talks and problem solving. And then from 130, I'm sorry, that's supposed to say 130 to 140, it's going to be whole group. So everybody's going to be in whole group. They're not going to be doing anything else. So that's why it says all students. And then from 140 to 210, all groups are going to be working on the task because you're introducing something. Maybe this is, you know, creating an anchor chart, or maybe it's doing an activity where you can move around and see what the kids are doing. You know, it's still active. You're still using those best practices, but it's whole group. And then maybe the last 20 to 30 minutes, you could be meeting with those RTI kids, making sure that they understand the instruction, while the kids who've got it can move on to an activity like maybe ST math or a game or something. So that's where, you know, that's an idea on, you know, on a day where you would want to introduce a concept or skill. Maybe that would be the first day of place value or the first day of addition and subtraction. So then let's say once you introduce something, a concept, then you might want to move into this kind of a schedule where, you know, again, they're going to do number talks or problem solving for the first 10 minutes. Then you're going to do whole group for about 10 minutes. And then you're going to move into small groups. And so here is very much like the table we had before, where from this time to this time, group 1 is going to be with the teacher, group 2 is going to be at the fluency and games, group 3 is going to be doing independent work, and group 4 is going to be at ST math. So do you see how I've created a schedule where you have time slots and where there's a very clear indication of what group will be doing what at what time? So another option is, you know, where you're not going to have any whole group time. Let's say you introduced this, you know, addition skill with base 10 blocks. Well, now you want the kids to practice. So you've already introduced it. You don't have to, you know, introduce it again. So you can move directly into small groups. So of course you do that 10 minutes of number talks or problem solving, but then you would move into your group time. Notice that this schedule and this one has the most amount of time allotted for your small groups. So this is what we ultimately want to move towards. A little bit of this and mostly this. That's the goal. Routines and procedures, step 5. So what is a routine that you want them to make sure that they do as they move from workstation to workstation? And then when they're in that workstation, how do you want them to be in it? What do you want them to be doing? How are they going to conduct themselves? And so, of course, once you have thought that out, you're definitely going to want to introduce it to them. And so some things to consider are that you probably want to have a consistent signal for your kids with clear expectations. When I was in the classroom, I would raise my hand, and the kids, you know, I set it up at the beginning of the school year and we practiced it and I gave them feedback and we adjusted. But the kids knew that when I raised my hand, they had to do a few things. They had to stop talking, they had to raise their hand, and they had to turn around and look at me. And so we practiced that. There was a clear expectation, because they knew that if I raised my hand, it's because I had something important to tell them. And so you want to have a consistently scheduled math block. You don't want to change it up every single day. You want to have some consistency. So, you know, just make sure that whatever you decide on, it's consistent and they consistently get to practice it. You want to have unwavering expectations for that voice level. You know, game time can get pretty loud. Even just working with a partner can become a little bit loud at times. So you definitely want to tell them the voice level that you want at the workstations. You want to model it. You want to have them practice it. You want to have them practice it the right way and practice it the wrong way, so that they clearly know what the appropriate voice level is. And, you know, of course, you want to give explicit expectations for those rotations when you're starting, you're stopping, and, you know, the product. So Emily Puente, who is a coach at Cerna, a math coach at Cerna Elementary, and I created a step-by-step guide that can help you roll this out in about 15 days. And so I'm going to share that with you at the end of this session, but you can use that if you want. Some people need a step-by-step, other people don't, because they can figure it out. And so it's completely up to you. But I've set something up to help you kind of go through and introduce your routines and procedures in your workstations. So here's some ideas of the norms that you want to have posted when they are working in small groups. So here's an idea. And I know that these are kind of, for younger kids, but the same rules apply whether they're younger or older. I can stay in my seat. I'm going to do my best work. I'm going to, talk in voice level 1. I'm going to ask my group before I ask my teacher. I'm going to clean everything up, before I go to the next workstation. And, some people like to keep it simple. Make sure you're learning and on task. Make sure your voices are quiet. Don't ask me anything until you've asked 3 people. It's up to you. Some people like more, some people like less. The point is, have some norms, have some procedures for the kids, make them explicit, post them, practice them, give them feedback on them. So let's talk about differentiating your tasks. So, once you decide on your workstations and once you choose them, you want to make sure that those workstations hit the needs of all your kids. So some kids, they're going to need the task to be changed a little bit. So here's some ways that you can change it. So option 1, you can have a completely different task. And this is going to be based on student needs. You might want to look at an IEP or a 504, something like that, that tells you, oh, okay, well, this student needs a completely different task. Another option is that you vary the same task. So for example, if you're doing a game where kids are rolling dice and, creating a 3-digit number and then subtracting a 3-digit number, then the way that you can differentiate it for kids is, some groups that are still struggling with that concept, they can, roll the dice for 2 numbers. So they're subtracting a 2-digit and a 2-digit, or maybe they've kind of got it, but they need to just kind of start off slow. It could be a 2-digit minus a 1-digit, or a 3-digit minus a 2-digit. It's the same task. The numbers are what's changing. And then of course, there's the learning in multiple ways. Kids, as long as they're learning and showing you in some way, that's the whole point. So they can maybe verbally tell you, like by recording themselves on an iPad and, putting it in Seesaw. They can write it out. They can draw it. Maybe they can draw a cartoon of how to do something, whatever you need them to do. Or maybe they want to use technology, maybe they need that speech to text app, or maybe they need to draw it on the iPad or on the computer and then, post it in your classroom. So these are just some basic ways that you can differentiate instruction. Your grade level special education teachers and your special education specialists for the district are going to be able to help you with your specific questions. So let's talk a little bit about must do and can do. Remember, we talked previously about making sure that your kids had enough to do in that workstation. So that's where this comes into play. If you have a must do, can do list, then you're going to have things that the kids absolutely have to do in that workstation. But then once they do these and they're done well, then they can do this. So this helps quite a bit, because if you'll notice in this workstation, there's 5 tasks. They're probably not going to finish all of them. They most likely will not. But you've given them the choice to where after you do this, then you have a choice to do these. And if you'll notice, these are purposeful tasks. So they're, vocabulary war, or I have who has for place value, or difference from 5,000. These are skills that the kids need to have and know. So they're purposeful, but they're fun, and they're things that they can choose after they've done the must do. So this really helps for that student that says, I already finished my work and the time's not up to change to the next workstation. This curtails a lot of that issue. And so finally, we want to practice, monitor, and adjust. Just remember, practice makes perfect. So when you're practicing those routines and procedures, you want to make sure to give them time. They need time to be able to practice what is expected of them, and time to give them to be able to be successful. So you want to allow your kids at least a few weeks to understand the expectations, to practice the procedures and the structure of all of your workstations and the way that you're going to run guided math. And so you want your workstations and how you're doing guided math to be smooth like peanut butter. You want to be consistent. You want to make sure that the expectation is always the same, that the procedure is always the same. Consistency is key. Your kids are young, they need consistency. So the more consistent you are, the better. And you want to give them time to reflect. If they were working in workstations today and they just really struggled with staying on task, it's important for you to stop and say, I see this, this, and this, and refer to that, routines and procedures chart and say, are we adhering to this? So you're, giving them time to really look back and see, okay, well, I'm doing this well, but these are the things that I want to work on. That's great. That's self-monitoring. And then of course, when they reflect, you want to give them that time to adjust. So if they are being loud in a workstation and you stop and you remind them and you practice, the appropriate voice levels, then you want to give them time to continue to practice it so that they can change it, because practice makes perfect. Another thing that you want to consider is, that you want your kids to build stamina. Do you remember how, in years past, we had that silent sustained reading with our kids, and, we always made a goal. Our goal was that the kids would read quietly for 20 minutes, without any interruptions, without stopping. Well, it's hard for young kids, to even adults, to be able to stay focused for a prolonged period of time. So we're not going to expect that our kids be able to focus at a workstation for 20 minutes right off the bat. So we want to create a goal. So create a goal with your kids and chart the progress. So, if the goal is that, the kids are going to be working on their tasks, they're going to work the whole time in their workstation, they're going to stay in their workstation, and they're going to do it for the whole 20 minutes, then have a table up, and every day, shade in the amount of time that they were able to stay focused in their workstation. The goal is to eventually hit, the 20 minutes or the 15 minutes that they spend in every workstation. And when they are successful for a period of time, when they hit that 20 minutes for consistently for weeks or a week or two, celebrate, because you want to reinforce the behavior that you want. So if you want them to stay focused for 15 minutes in a workstation, have them practice it, chart it, and then once they hit that goal, celebrate, because that's going to get you more of that consistent focus from them. So let's review, because we've talked about a lot of things. Remember, this is what guided math looks like. Number talks and problem solving for 10 minutes. Then you move into a whole group time, which is a mini lesson. You don't want to spend a lot of time there, but these are the things that you would do there. And then you're going to move into the largest chunk of your math block, which is small group time and the simultaneous workstations. And so in small group time, you're still going to be providing core instruction. You're just going to be pulling kids in that group according to their needs and differentiating according to their needs. And through this entire process, you're going to be conferencing with your kids and assessing them. Constant formative assessment and constant feedback is what's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. And so to implement it, you could follow those 6 steps that I showed you earlier. Choose your rotation. Are you in or out? What's your rotation model? I want to do 3 workstations and I don't want to be a part of them. I want to be pulling kids out. Make a plan. Okay, so I'm going to have my bins over here. The tools are going to be in the bin so that they don't have to get up and get them. All of those things. You're going to plan out the logistics. Then you're going to make a schedule. Okay, I have 90 minutes for my math block. So at this time, we're going to do this. And at that time, we're going to do that. You are designating a time for each part. You're going to be thinking about the routines and procedures. You're going to think, okay, when they're in a workstation, I want them to be doing X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to set up some procedures to help them be able to do X, Y, and Z. And then we're going to practice, monitor, and adjust. So that's kind of a very quick review of what we talked about today. And so here are the resources that I was telling you about earlier. One of them is going to be, of course, the guided math components. I'm going to give you a link that has this in a table format because, you know, I know it's hard to remember things. And so it's written right here to help you refer back to it. And then the other resource that I'm providing you with is the one that I was telling you about that I made with Emily Puente. These are a very explicit instruction for you, the teacher, that tells you, okay, on day one of guided math, you're going to do this in your morning meeting, and then you're going to do this in your math block. And so you know, you can use this or you can not. It's up to you. It's just that some people need to have it broken down a little bit more. And so I am differentiating the instruction and providing those people with a little more step-by-step. So with that being said, I want to give you a 30-day challenge. So my 30-day challenge is this. First, I want you to decide that you want to commit to trying guided math for 30 days. So make the decision. I want to commit. I don't want to commit. If you say, yes, I want to commit, then the second step is going to be to reach out to your grade level specialist and partner with them to plan out the details of how you're going to do this. So, you know, if you're kinder, your specialist is going to be Krishna. Here's her email address. If you're first grade, Sandra is your specialist. Here's her email. I'm second grade. Amy Jernander is third. Jessica Ramirez is fourth. Kyle Robeson is the fourth grade ham specialist. And then Maria Riojas is the fifth grade ham specialist. So whatever grade level you are in, you would reach out to that designated person and let them know, hey, I want to try the 30-day challenge for guided math. And then the third step would be to, you know, once you plan it all out with your specialist and you get everything ready, then you're going to consistently do guided math in your classroom for 30 days. That means you're going to, you know, practice the routines and the procedures and help them to get used to it. And then you're going to continue it for 30 days. So a total of 30 days minimum. You can do more, but not less. And then the fourth step is that I want you to stop and reflect on, you know, the changes that you saw in your kids, the challenges that you had and the successes that you saw. Because remember, an important part of us growing and being able to be successful at something is to stop and reflect and adjust. So just like we want our kids to stop, reflect, and adjust, we need to stop, reflect, and adjust on what's working, what doesn't, how can I tweak this, what are the, you know, what are the changes that I saw. And remember, you're gonna see great changes when you do guided math because you are gonna meet the needs of your kids in a way that you've never met them before. So all that being said, I just want to thank you for your time. Remember, my name is Marina Clark, and you can find me at this email if you have any questions. I'd like for you to take some time, just a few minutes, to fill out the survey. So you can either take the picture of that QR code, or you can go to this email address, or I'm sorry, not email address, to this web address. And when you are filling out that Google form, you want to select Super Saturday because this is a Super Saturday session. So please make sure that you go in and provide that feedback. It helps us to tweak our sessions and to be able to see what next steps you want to take or how we can support you even more, or what things you still need clarified. So thank you so much for being with me today. I hope that you will take the 30-day challenge. I encourage you to do it. I have never seen anybody look back and say, I wish I would have never done guided math. I always hear, I'm never going back to whole group instruction again. So thank you and have a great day.